Thank you for choosing to spend your valuable time with us today in this session. My name is Vaidi. I'm the worldwide tech leader for migrations at AWS. I've been with AWS for 10 plus years. In my initial years, the primary drivers for customers carrying out a large-scale migration to AWS was mostly around, I need lower cost, need to improve my productivity, need to increase my operational efficiency. So these were the three primary drivers. In my conversations today with customers, agility and innovation is a primary driver. It doesn't mean that the other three factors are no longer relevant. The three factors of cost, productivity, operational excellence are more a given in the transformation, any digital transformation journey at scale. So with that said, for agility and innovation, migration and modernization becomes a foundation. AWS has streamlined and helped tens and thousands of customers in their migration modernization journey. And in doing this, what we have learned is it is a journey. It's with migrate, modernize, and then transform to be successful, to drive agility and innovation, and at the same time, be able to successfully deliver on your primitives or the givens of cost, productivity, and excellence, operational excellence. So with that said, today we have with us one of our key customers in the travel and hospitality industry who has been through this journey in multiple iterations over the years and successfully transformed their business using AWS. I'd love to hear from him, especially going through how the journey is, what the learnings are, and what the insights are, and how it can help you, your customers, and your organization in being able to replicate the same journey in driving the agility and innovation. So with that said, I'm pleased and honored to have Adnan, who is a managing vice president at Marriott, who has delivered this migrate, modernize, transform journey at Marriott, delivering excellence and value, and elevating the traveler experience for 200 million plus Bonvoy customers. Adnan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ready?
Looking forward to your insight.
Absolutely. Well, hello, everyone. I was here a couple of years ago when Marriott was just starting its transformation journey. And here we are a couple of years into it. When Vaidi reached out, I felt it would be a good time to provide an update on how we're doing and also share some of the benefits that we have started to see already through this transformation. Now, the transformation that Marriott is going through is pretty big, right? It's a few $1 billion worth of transformation, so we won't be able to cover everything in a 1-hour session. But I will highlight some of the things that we have started to see already, and especially as they pertain to agility, cost effectiveness, and improvements in and around our operations. But then majority of the time that we will spend is more on a fireside chat where we have some questions that Vaidi will ask, but I encourage each and every one of you to ask the questions because your journey is going to be based on your factors. It will be different, but there are a lot of common things that we can learn from each other. All right, so when we started this journey about 3 years ago, we really wanted to think out of the box. And we wanted to see how we can take our technology products closer to our customers. Marriott being a global company with our properties all over the globe, over 9,000 of them, we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just a single region that got benefits of what we were doing, right? Of how we were hosting things, where we were hosting them, but it was similar across the globe in all regions. We also did not want us to remain constrained to the data center mentality, right? Where all workloads have to be in the data centers, all transactions have to terminate in the data center. But instead, we wanted to take our virtual data centers wherever the customers were, wherever our associates were. Not limit our talent only to North America, but actually be able to go and hire and create capability centers wherever we felt talent was available. So as we got into that journey, we started looking at and thinking about the next generation of customer experience. Differentiated guest experience using AI, integrated digital experience, whether it's Bonvoy application or Marriott.com, reliability, reduced downtime, keeping the lights on being extremely important, customized offers and promotions, customized guest experiences, faster time to market. And since Marriott is growing through acquisitions, through partnerships, as well as organic growth, we wanted to make sure that our solutions were turnkey whenever there was an acquisition or a partnership or even organic growth, right? Gone are the days when you have to order infrastructure, it has to be shipped, then you have to plug it in just because you're creating a new property or a new hotel. So we wanted it literally to be done within 60 minutes. The property, at least the infrastructure and the technology pieces, will be up and running that day. Okay. In order for us to do that, what we didn't want to do was create a cover on top of old legacy technology. We wanted to do it the right way. We wanted to make sure that our platforms were modernized, that we had a stable foundation that was built for scale and for agility, and that we had standardized patterns so that we can do things much faster. We were significantly more secure, right? So today, what we're going to talk about is really that stable foundation, the stable platforms, and the standardized patterns that are now resulting in the transformation of our technologies that run on top of it. Before we get into the technology and some of the work that we have done, we have 4 key customers. The first one is our business products, right? What they want is faster time to market. They want shorter innovation cycles. They want ability to upsell more products, more services. They want to move away from the traditional CapEx model with 3 to 5 year long depreciation cycles and complexities to pay as you go. As you need capacity, you buy capacity. And when you don't need that capacity, you can shut it down. Our application engineering teams, we wanted to make sure that they were excited about innovation. And infrastructure was not an obstacle, right? If a highly passionate engineer woke up at 2 a.m. with a brilliant idea, well, they shouldn't have to wait for a server to be provisioned, right? They can do it right there and then themselves without having to put some request in. Rapid prototyping is then an outcome of it. Because you can put your ideas into production faster, you can prototype faster, you can build incrementally. And lastly, modular designs, whether it's microservices or some other way, using some of the native services, cloud native services that are available, the ability to start and stop work and change direction very quickly. For our properties, we wanted self-healing systems. We don't want our properties to be down. We don't want the guests to be stuck in a situation where our properties cannot provide them the services. We want simplified and enhanced security, right? Again, that OpEx model as opposed to the long depreciation cycles. And lastly, turnkey solutions, technology in a box, new property, no problem. Within an hour or 2, you will have your infrastructure, right? That's the journey that we started a couple of years ago. Lastly, our guests, the most important. Reliability becomes really important. It's the most frustrating thing when you're at a hotel and your Wi-Fi is not working, right? And you're preparing for a meeting, or even watching Netflix for that matter. Similarly, higher digital capabilities where you can go out and not just have to search for a property in a particular region, but you can actually interact with our digital systems that could recommend what you should be doing based on your performance, based on your preferences. So as we were looking through all of that we wanted to do and the complexities that we had around changing our platforms and building up from from scratch, we realized that Marriott didn't just get to where it got to, the level of complexity in our technology, overnight. There was a journey, right? It happened organically, just like with any other major organization. We created our first data center in 1987. We had 361 properties at that point. Wasn't that difficult. Majority of it were in North America. So having a data center in North America made sense. But within a couple of decades, we had grown to over 6,900 properties with 13 plus data centers and colos around the globe. That's where the complexity came in. Keeping it connected, keeping it always on, making sure that product number one can talk to product number two, making sure that our offices were always connected and always on, and our customers could always access the services at any given point. That's where the complexity started. So around the end of 2021, we had the final realization that we need to do something about it, and we need to modernize all this infrastructure that had organically grown. So in 2022, we launched our digital transformation. In 21, we created the plans. We said we will go bold. We will go 100% on cloud to develop our platforms. We will exit our data centers 100%, and we will start from ground up, from bottoms up, by first building the platforms, and then the technologies that will consume the services offered by those platforms. We had AWS presence at that time. We had cloud presence at that time, but it wasn't quite built in a way to scale. So we rebuilt it completely. We deployed our cloud platforms around the globe in EMEA, in APAC, in North America, rebuilt the ones that were in North America, and we automated it completely. Today, we can launch a Marriott-specific cloud platform, or you can call it a virtual data center, anywhere around the globe in less than 3 weeks. Right? We couldn't do that when we had brick and mortar. Excuse me. We also started working on our global data center exit strategy, which meant that we had to migrate at scale because we're talking about thousands of infrastructure components that had to be moved out. Everything from servers to network infrastructure. And the mainframes. So we still have a couple of mainframes. We've been able to shut one down already, and we have 2 more to go. So we created the migration factory. It took us about 3 months to create it in partnership with AWS. We went through the MAP program, and the following 9 months, we were able to move over 1,300 VMs over to the cloud. At this point, we can migrate up to 3,000 VMs in a year, right? And we're moving at that pace. We started shutting down our data centers at a very fast pace. When we started doing that, we noticed that we had moved our constraint from technology to processes because our processes were not modern enough to sustain the technologies and platforms that we were bringing in. So we started looking at delivery transformation. We brought in scaled agile framework. We brought in the product model. We started focusing on operational excellence, both in terms of remediating our tech debt and also building some of the practices from the very beginning, such as FinOps, to ensure that we didn't have cost overruns. By the time we reached 2023, and we were firing on all cylinders, we grew our scope further, and we brought in optimizations and self-service. The original dream of an engineer, an application engineer, being able to deploy his or her own infrastructure. And we're very close to releasing that to our application engineers. The capability has already been developed to a great extent. Foundational maturity, building standards and ensuring that everyone followed the standards. They were not optional. For instance, all our new production workload can only be deployed through a pipeline. There's no other way to any environment if you don't have a pipeline. The building of the pipeline is automated at this point. It's click of a button. It gets produced in under 15 minutes, right? And the infrastructure, such as a new cluster for Kubernetes, get deployed in the following 15 minutes. So within 30 minutes, we can put a production scale environment ready for our engineers to start working on it. There were other platforms that we felt were extremely important. For instance, we have built 129 environments over the last 18 months. These are full-scale environments, development, test, production, staging environments. All of them 100% on Kubernetes. Not a single VM has been deployed to build a new product on it. Right? Observability and operational efficiencies. 100%, actually 99% to be exact, of our infrastructure assets running on AWS, which is thousands and thousands of components, are fully tagged. Today, we can tell you exactly what container is running, what is the workload in it, who owns it, what is the cost center, what is the last 6, 10, 12 months of cost on that container, and what is the projected forecast for the next 9 to 12 months. What that has allowed to do is be more proactive in how we react to potential cost overruns. Right? We don't have to wait for the cost to go over before we do something about it. We can do it more proactively. By the end of 2023, which was about a year and a few months into the journey, we had grown from 6,900 properties to 8,700. Our acquisitions, our organic growth was continuing on. However, our data centers had gone down by 6 within 1 year. In 2024, we continued to expand our scope. While the original aspirations were still there and the work continued on to mature everything that we had started, we started to look at more modern tech operations. So this year, we have been focused on bringing in concepts like service reliability engineering, DevSecOps practice, looking at our transactions and geofencing it, moving our digital assets outside of North America, and distributing it globally so that the customers can get a similar experience, regardless of where they are. We're also looking at ways of working. So again, as the technology modernized, we found constraints in other areas. We have a global labor strategy defined. We're setting up a follow-the-sun model for our central HQ operations. Right? We just built a brand new capability center in Asia Pacific, and we're hiring over there, and we're moving some of our assets over there. Now we have the ability to localize the experiences for our guests, follow the local rules, such as the rules in China, rules in India, and many other countries in EMEA, right, that are different from North America. We have the ability to do it for that region, in that region. Today, as a result of it, year over year, we have reduced our major incidents by 18%. We have reduced our outages by over 27%. Our mean time to recovery has improved by 8%. And we have recuperated 121% of every single dollar that we have invested in migrating to cloud. So we have actually taken back more than we invested for the migrations. And this is since the beginning of 2022. So just a couple of years. But the journey doesn't stop here, right? This is the very beginning. It's just a couple of years. And we're not really looking for a destination because every time we reach a milestone, our visibility increases, it improves, and we see the next milestone. So we expect this journey to continue on forever. Right? We're going to be in the transformation business for a very long time. With that in mind, our next set of capabilities that we're looking at is integration with artificial intelligence. Everyone talks about it. Everyone wants to use it. We felt that we have to rebuild our platforms. We have to rebuild our technologies. We had to be very strategic about it and then move into AI. We're already using AI capabilities. We brought AI in for FinOps, and it has saved us millions of dollars in operational costs, right? But we are going to expand that. Now that we have a very strong observability platform that has been modernized while reducing the cost by 50% for that platform, we feel that we're in a great state, great place to bring in things like predictive analytics and self-healing systems. Because unless you can observe your systems and unless you can start to identify what is going to happen to your system and predict, have the ability to predict, you can't really self-heal, right? So now we're at a point where we are looking at that as the next step. And lastly, our aspirations to be more green and more sustainable, bring more sustainable energy. We're looking at more energy-efficient technologies, such as the AWS Graviton processor, quantum computing, elastic environments. That has totally changed the way we design our systems. Before, we used to design based on the maximum capacity that would be required, maybe 3, 4, 5 times a year. And the rest of the time, that capacity was idle. Today, because we have complete elasticity on Kubernetes, on EKS, we can scale up in seconds, and we can also scale down in seconds. So our design principles are changing from designing for the peaks to designing for the absolute minimum that's needed. The rest is already built into the platform. And whatever product we put on that platform inherits that capability. All right. So all this work doesn't happen without some learnings. You make mistakes, you learn from the mistakes, and there are hundreds of learnings that we have. In fact, the second half of this session is really focused on that, right? What worked, what didn't work. Any questions that you guys have, I encourage you to ask that as well. But here, what you see on the screen are a list of things that I felt are important to touch on. Cloud is big. AWS has hundreds of services. So it's very easy to get lost in that sea of cloud. So you have to make sure that you optimize your journey for something, whatever that something might be for your situation. Whether it's speed, whether it's rebuilding, re-architecting your systems, whether it's bringing in newer capabilities, whether it's cost optimization, which is pretty much a given for every organization, I feel, right? Making sure that those priorities are always top and center. Everything else can come in after that. Transforming to a value-based delivery. It's very difficult to keep track of things when you're going through a major multi-billion-dollar transformation, right? You are changing the very processes that you have used in the past to keep track of it. So ensuring that the principle of value and clear accountability is applied from the very beginning. The way we did it was by building product and services and platform-based teams so that the accountability was singular. And then we asked those teams to create a value statement for the work, for the results that they were producing. Designing for flexibility. There's always something that will come and hit you while you're least expecting it. And that happens in every transformation, even outside of transformation. So designing the way your approach is, your strategy for execution, and even your architecture, dividing it into smaller components, into services, so that you're agile and you can change the course as needed without having to overhaul everything. Another very important lesson is not to outsource the problems. When you adopt a platform like AWS, you get a lot of capabilities, a lot of partners, a lot of specialists along with it, from the large consulting partners to specific products that get created, the newly seed-funded companies, venture-funded companies, to large enterprises that have solutions. What's really important is to leverage all those expertise because you're going to need it. But bring those capabilities in-house. Own the solution. Don't outsource the problem for someone else to solve. Measuring progress instead of perfection. So a lot of times companies go back to their old ways of doing things because they don't see the perfection. What's really important is to measure in increments where you are to where you're going and where you're coming from. And as long as you can do that and you can continue to improve one step at a time, you'll be okay. You'll get to where you're going. Might take some time. And lastly, controlling costs from day one. So we invested in our FinOps practice, which was a close partnership between tech and finance. And we created that from the very beginning. In fact, that is one of our first implementations of AI for infrastructure. And that AI has saved us millions of dollars in optimizing our costs. Right? So controlling costs from day one is extremely important. Moving from cost savings, which happens after the cost has been incurred, to cost avoidance, which is more predictive in nature. Right? Moving to that level of maturity. At this point, majority of our cost savings are actually cost avoidance. We avoid them before we incur them. And that, in and of itself, is just maturity of FinOps. All right. So in conclusion, just within a couple of years, we have been able to achieve a significant number of goals and strategies that we wanted to implement. We are launching tens of products as part of this transformation. We have built hundreds of environments. We have shut down old ways of thinking. We have brought in new platforms, many of them that come out of the box with AWS. We have a much higher and tighter security standards, right? Whether it's encryption or tokenization or some other form. And we are reducing our costs as we move forward and take our technologies and distribute them globally. With that, I'm going to invite Vaidi back and see if we can get into more Q&A.
Okay. Thanks, Anand, for the wonderful insights. I do appreciate.
Absolutely.
And, yeah, looking forward. So, team, we'll do a fireside chat for a few minutes. So, based on the journey that Marriott went through and the insights that Anand shared, I want to ask a few questions that are top of mind for many of our customers. And then I want to open up the floor where everyone gets to ask their questions as well. Do think about the questions that you want to ask about. And we'll definitely have some mic runners who would be able to give you a chance to ask those questions as well. So with that said, thank you, Anand. It was one thing that really stood out I know I have heard many customers say this, is you mentioned you were able to carry out a large-scale migration at no cost and reap some benefits from it and be able to reinvest it back to the modernization and transformation journey. So that is great, and I would love to have everyone in this room who are going through this digital transformation journey to have that. But before setting some context for our fireside chat, what were the primary drivers when Marriott was thinking about migrating to AWS?
So the drivers were about transforming ultimately our guest experience, right? And our customer experience. That's how the whole journey started. We knew that the systems that we were working on that were like our central reservation system or our Bonvoy system, these have been very solid mainframe-based platforms that have served us really well for the last several decades, right? But where we want to go in this era of globalization, we want to take the technologies and we want to take the experiences closer to our customers. But in order for us to do that, we first have to build the platforms. And it's not easy to build those platforms in a data center environment. In fact, many of those platforms actually come out of the box when you get to the cloud. So the fastest path to building, to getting to the point where we are building for our customers' experience was to adopt the cloud technologies that were already there. Right. One of our principles is, from our Chief Technology Officer, is to build for differentiation and buy commodity. And for us, Marriott, being in the hospitality business, we're not in the business of running data centers. We're in the business of creating experiences for our customers. And the sooner we got out of the businesses that we were not wanting to be in, the faster we could invest in the businesses that we wanted to be in, which are more customer-centric.
Yeah, love it. Agility, innovation, primary driver. We keep hearing any digital transformation journey. So on the rapid migration, what were some of the biggest challenges that Marriott encountered?
Well, there's resistance to change. There's fear of the unknown. There is the lack of belief that we could actually transform at the pace that we've been transforming, right? So you almost have to pull the company, and company being the associates, right? You have to pull that into the transformation, right? It's Whitey and I were actually talking earlier, and I told him how I learned swimming while I was strategizing around the pool and telling myself exactly how I will move my arm and my legs. My father pushed me in the pool and said, "Swim." That's how you learn how to swim. And sometimes you have to do that. You have to get in the water to learn how to swim, right? So, the pushback to change is probably one of the primary ones that I've seen in many organizations. And Marriott was no different. It was just fear of change. But then in addition to that, once you get in, sometimes you underestimate things. Sometimes you find out that things are actually much tougher to do than you thought. And you figure your way out. When we moved to EKS, we ran into a lot of issues. We ran into a lot of challenges. We had multiple major transformations going on the product side, on the application side. And we were telling the same teams to migrate to EKS. Well, it was competing priorities. But we had to figure that out. We had to think on our feet, and in close partnership with our application teams, we were able to move forward. But that's where flexibility comes in, agility comes in, right? There's always that event that you don't anticipate, no matter how much you plan. You just have to have the faith that you will go through it and you will figure out a way.
Yeah, I love the insight, especially I know you need to have all the information up front to do the decision making. You also need to have a pilot, not a POC, not a demo, like a pilot to validate what you see and embark on that. With the swimming example that you were sharing with us, I do much appreciate that. The thing is, I know some of the challenges, balancing trade-off and overcoming many of those. What were the key measures for migration success? How was air traffic control done? I know when you're carrying out these large-scale migrations, the KPIs comes into play. What were some of those KPIs that allowed you to do this air traffic control? Hey, should I change the strategy? Should I go back to the drawing boards? Or maybe should I accelerate? Something is working really well. Is there any example KPIs you want to call out?
Yeah, so there were actually several KPIs that we created, and then we changed them. And at one point, we had too many KPIs, so we had to scale back. But one thing I can tell you, the most important thing was speed. Because when you're teaching an organization how things could happen, how cloud operates, how those platforms operate, how you can do things incrementally and yet do it at scale, right? Speed is how you learn. The more you can do, the faster you will learn. So while we brought in training, and in fact, we had a partnership with AWS to come and train our associates on modern technologies, training can only take you so far, right? You really have to, at some point, get into the pool to start swimming. So that's where we measured it by the number of VMs that we were exiting from our data centers over to the cloud.
Got it.
And I think that was probably the most important thing that then enables the migration and transformation at a much faster velocity. But it's not the most obvious thing that companies think of.
Very, very true. Yeah. Speed is key. Yeah.
It is key.
The thing is, after the rapid migration, so one of the things I heard from your presentation is building the modern cloud platform. So how did it accelerate innovation?
So the journey to cloud is interesting because it's not just about technology. It starts as a technology journey. But before you know it, you start to identify areas that are impeding you, which are outside of technology. So like in my example, once we moved to cloud, we found out that cloud is giving us enormous scale and speed, velocity, but our processes were not allowing us to move faster, right? Our budgetary cycles were still annual. And as we were learning and as we were accelerating, we were running back to finance and we were saying, we need more funding. We need more upfront seed funding to make this go faster, right? And that's where the flexibility came in from finance. And they said, OK, let's start talking about it on a quarterly basis. What exactly do you need? And as we scaled, the funding had to scale with it. And ultimately, the benefits that were coming out also scaled along with it, right? And the net result was there was definitely an upfront investment, but the net result was we recuperated 121% of our costs.
Yeah, definitely. Process is a key thing. I did hear that you mentioned about the scale agile framework. Mm-hmm. I know in data centers you have the traditional infrastructure teams. So how did they get mapped to the product and services teams that are there within the scaled agile framework?
From the very beginning, we said we will no longer be an infrastructure team. We will be a platform team. We will create platforms that can help our products and applications that run on it inherit some of the basic capabilities that have to be developed, such as observability, such as chargeback functionality, FinOps, security. When we deploy our platform anywhere around the globe, we have 100+ security controls built into it from the start. And every product that runs on it inherits those controls, right? So very tight guardrails. Moving at that pace also made us realize that our delivery methodology was very slow, right? So we could build faster, but our process was not allowing us to move faster. And it's not that it's perfect right now because it's a journey, right? But we are trying really hard to bring our cycle time, our cycle to deliver something, as close to the touch time, what it takes to do the work. And that's an ongoing journey, and that's where SAFe was one of the things that we introduced. And we said, we're going to start iterating, and we're going to start doing PI plannings. We started with one agile release train, and today we have somewhere in the vicinity of 40, right, nice. within a year or two. And some of our major transformations are happening using agile framework, a scaled agile framework. Product model was another thing. Accountability was key. So making sure that we have a product owner, a product manager, a product team that is responsible and accountable for everything that happens on that platform that we're building. And not just that, they're also responsible for what is about to come, the operations of that platform. So we are transforming roughly about an 800-person team and moving from the traditional L1, L2, L3 way of operating to service reliability engineering and DevSecOps. For that, we needed the product teams.
Got it. Got it. So creating kind of a tangent here, switching gears. So I know having cloud economics before you embark on the AWS journey, and having a sound cloud financial management once you are in the AWS journey is something that is critical, crucial, as you mentioned. And you also mentioned a lot of benefits that you have achieved using FinOps with GenAI. What were some of the cultural changes to embrace FinOps with GenAI at Marriott?
Look, there's always fear of the unknown. When you're bringing in artificial intelligence, there is a fear right now in the market, right? So you have to be very careful, and you have to start small, and you have to experiment. You have to do rapid prototyping, which you have enabled through the cloud migration, through building platforms, right, and standardizing things. But ultimately, the proof is in the pudding. Once it came in, and once we started to show how the costs were going down, and ultimately how we were avoiding costs, the belief started to grow across the teams, across the individuals. But there's also a lot of support that came from the top. Right? There is a monthly meeting where we present our FinOps and our just very simple graph of what our target savings was versus what we have saved. And we are saving in double digits every year.
That's nice, yeah. And switching
when
gears
I say double
again,
digits, I meant millions.
Yeah. So this one, I know earlier in the year today we saw the CrowdStrike IT outage, which created major disruptions for companies in travel and hospitality. So I'd love to hear from Marriott on the thought process through business, thinking through some of this disaster recovery, business continuity, is what were the learnings from it, and how are you looking into it and looking forward it from a strategy perspective?
Yeah, so I think one thing that is probably fairly obvious to a lot of enterprises is the ability some of these products have of our to control our systems, right? How do we limit that, and how do we make sure that we have policies in place where there isn't a blanket approval to do whatever they want to do to a machine, even if it's in the name of security, right? So we need to be able to control our systems. Ultimately, it's our problem, and we need to own the solution. We can't outsource it, right? But then in addition to that, I think we are, at least within Marriott, we have started to look away from just the traditional disaster recovery, because by definition, disaster recovery means that a disaster has occurred, and now you have to recover from it. From that concept to disaster indifferent. And we're building that in our digital channels, where if there is a disaster, the transactions continue to flow. The customers continue to transact with our systems as if nothing has happened. And that's where our design principles and architectures are going in.
It's nice. Definitely making sure the systems have configured for least privileges and making it indifferent, as you said, especially when it comes to disaster recovery indifferent. I like the terminology there in terms of getting to from a strategy standpoint.
We'll put a patent on it.
So I know that I want to open up the floor for the questions as well. One last question. What's next for Marriott? Any new services that you want to try out, looking to try out in AWS? What's next, Marriott AWS?
Absolutely. I think the big things that are coming up in the following years is getting into AI ops, getting into self-healing systems. Now that we have the basic capabilities in place, we can start looking at building self-healing systems that can predict a disaster. I mean, no one wants to wake up in the middle of the night because your main digital channel is down, right? So while we are trying to reduce that through the disaster indifferent architecture, we're also looking at the ability that the system recovers itself. And wouldn't it be nice if at 8 a.m. you just get an email saying, a disaster occurred, I recovered myself, take a look at these modules, there's something going on, right? And the customer is not impacted. So those are the capabilities that we now want to invest in. And while we continue to build and modernize and mature our platforms that we've already started to create.
Got it. Great, Adnan. Wishing you all success. I do know the capability is there. The potential is limitless with generative AI, and the more platforms, more services that we bring in will truly allow some of the capabilities to be realized, not years away, months away. So with that said, I want to open up any questions from the room. I do have, maybe we can do one question from right and then another question from the other side. So we can keep switching. I see hands up here. Vijindu, yeah, over here.
You mentioned self-service capability that you built in your platform. Two-part question. Did you build that internally, or did you look into an external or a third-party product for building that capability? And what have you done to put guardrails around that to make sure that developers are not, leading to cost overruns by provisioning things that they should not be provisioning?
Sure. So the first part to your question, we actually worked closely with Spotify, and we brought in their platform, and we built upon it. Just as of last week or so, we have outgrown their platform called Backstage. So while we were growing and we were predicting that we will outgrow that platform, we had started to build our own platform, and that went into production just a couple of weeks ago. So now we have a complete soup to nuts, our own internal platform for self-service. It is capable of deploying pipelines, EKS clusters, relational database service, NoSQL database service. I believe there are like 30, 40, something along those lines, different services that we can deploy. Currently, it's being used by our infrastructure team, so we have improved our cycle time by building it faster through that automation. But we are also opening up pilots with our application teams where our engineers will deploy the infrastructure themselves, because ultimately, we want to get out of the business of building infrastructure. Right? We want to be in the business of building new capabilities on our platforms and enabling our customers, which includes our application engineers. Your second question, how do we make sure that our application engineers don't get trigger happy and just deploy a lot of infrastructure? Well, that's where FinOps comes in. That's where our ability to automate the approval cycles come in. So I'm not a big believer in blocking governance, where you have your review after review after review before the request goes to the infrastructure team, and then they review and collect the requirements and deploy. Right? The cycle time is huge. What used to take us 6 months, we can now deliver in under 1 hour, in actually 32 minutes, if you're building something on EKS. But in order for us to get to that stage, we have to make sure that the approval is not eliminated, but it's automated. There's standard patterns that we have allowed, right? It's like controlling water. It doesn't matter how big your dam is. It will break through it at some point, right? It's just a matter of time. So instead of blocking it, you enable the flow in the direction that you want the water to go in. And that happens through standardization, right? We wanted growth in containers, so we automated containers within a very tight guardrail so that our engineers can operate within it. Right? It's like building the car and giving it to them, but you know they can only drive it on the track. It's not going to go off track. And then if there are any misses, even after that, FinOps comes into play. And when you publish the reports on a monthly basis and you start projecting the future in terms of cost, it gets the attention very quickly, right? And then you add it all up and show the cumulative to the leaders of the departments, right? Their eyes open, because now you have millions of dollars that you are projected to run over, and they will look at every application, and they will look at every piece of infrastructure and make sure that they bring it back under control. So rather than trying to block the application teams that want to move faster, you allow them to manage themselves through guardrails, through standardization, and through monthly reporting and forward-looking predictions on where they're headed.
You talked about your KPI of VMs migrated. Were those always VMs that were being lifted and redone, or how many of them were lifted and maybe shipped with slight buffing?
It was both. It was a mix. It depended. So what we were optimizing was for velocity. We wanted to move fast, right? And if the VM was operating on a technology that was fine, it was not end of life, we did the lift and shift, and then we optimized it. But if a VM was on a technology that we wanted to get off of, or if it was past its end of life, then we could re-platform it, redesign it, re-architect it, right? But it was always get out of the data center first, and then optimize it once it's on cloud. For instance, some of our Linux platforms, we want to get out of it because they're license-based and they're expensive. And we're moving to more native Linux platforms. And that we built in as part of our migration factory, where it was re-platform. Some of the VMs that we migrated are now being moved into containers in EKS, right? That happened after we moved them out of the data centers. So it depended on the situation. I don't have the exact metrics or numbers, but it was always optimized for speed, because the first couple of years were dedicated to our associates learning cloud and how to operate in cloud.
Hi, Adnan. First of all, thank you for sharing the insights. I think the metrics that you presented was pretty interesting. I had two questions. The first one is, you talked about having to rebuild the AWS platforms when you started your journey. My question is, with where the technology stands today, would you still do some of the things that you had to do back then, and what would be some of your reasons? I can hold on to my second question once you answer.
Sure. Would I redo certain things differently? Absolutely. There are always going to be opportunities, right? Again, we're not, like one of the slides said, we're not looking for perfection, which means that there are times we're going to go down in a direction that we would ultimately change, right? So for instance, migrating to containers, we initially we selected a different technology, still running on AWS, but we selected a different technology for containers until we did the real-time tests and analysis, and we said, now we're going to go to EKS. Now, there was cost associated with it, right? And we paid, and we can call it we lost some money, or we can say we learned. That was our learning. That was our training budget. Ultimately, we're on a better platform that is 33% cheaper than the same platform, than the previous platform that was running that workload, whether it was EC2s or something else, right? As Steve Jobs once said, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. So hindsight being 20/20, absolutely there are things that I would change. And that is because that is why we need the flexibility in whatever we do.
All right. One of the metrics that you showed, I think you said there's 123% in cost savings that you had. I don't know if you have this data. What percentage savings would you say came from lift and shift versus actually having to re-architect and change your existing systems to be more cloud native in order to get the savings that you did?
Whatever we migrated, we optimized. So it was less about moving it to cloud native technologies because we haven't, while we are building new products and we are re-architecting, that takes time, right? Rebuilding an application platform, re-architecting it, redesigning it takes time. So all of the savings that I showed, the 121% that we have recuperated, which was invested in migrating to cloud, it was by moving it at a fast speed and then optimizing it once it moved. And then, yes, ultimately re-platforming some of it as well. But the re-platforming savings is separate. Especially the major re-platforming that has to be done. We haven't quite gotten to that point in our journey where we have a lot of savings coming out of it, but we will. Yep.
Hi, question. Congratulations on the journey thus far. Curious how you've leveraged partners or considered partners in this journey and how you consider using them going forward through this generative AI revolution that we're going through right now.
Oh, our partners are key to our success. We don't pretend to know everything. We don't know everything, right? So we need experts. And we don't have all the experts in-house. So I see several of our partners sitting over here that have been right in the middle of this transformation with us. But the key in using the partnerships is not to outsource our problems, but to insource the solutions and the expertise that they bring. And that has been our guiding principle. And everything that we are doing right now and transforming next year, we're actually planning to transform our 800-person operational organization into a service reliability engineering practice. All of that is focused on insourcing the expertise instead of outsourcing the problem. So we will continue to follow that principle.
Team, we are in the last 2 minutes.
Sure. So as you went through the transformation of from traditional data center to the cloud, the infrastructure team and the engineers in it, how did you reorganize the team in the DevSecOps model? Like, where did people go? How do you organize the team in Marriott?
So it was done in 2 ways. One was the products that were already running, right? That requires a little bit of a journey. And that's where the service reliability engineering concept comes in. And it's a stepping stone for us. We don't consider it to be the target state. So we want to modernize our operations. We want to continue to stabilize our systems. We want to continue to move towards disaster and different architectures. And that's where service reliability engineering comes in close partnership with our application teams that will help improve. Ultimately, SRE becomes a concept, and it gets merged into the appropriate team, whether it's the platform that the application is running on or the application itself. For the new products that we're building, for instance, EKS is now supported by a platform team. We took them straight to DevSecOps. And the principle was very simple. You build it, you own it. You're going to build the new capabilities, you're going to support it. If you build a crappy product, you're the one that's going to be waking up at 1 a.m., right? And that drives good behavior because right from the beginning, they want to do it in a way that they don't end up answering the phone at 1 a.m.
That's great. So team, and I know we have a last minute. We want to conclude the questions. I want to take some of the conclusion slides. I do appreciate. Thank you, Arnav.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for your time on behalf of everyone. I would love everyone to have the same journey as Marriott as well. And AWS and the partner ecosystem is there to help you in the journey. So with that said, I also want to bring out, from a journey perspective, what AWS has and what we have announced earlier this year. I know from Adnan, we heard a few challenges. Like, speed is critical, right? We need to make sure the speed is there for the initial rapid migration. So we should not have any schedule overruns. and being able to find the right guidance, be it the strategy selection, hey, should I rehost, should I relocate, should I co-locate, or should I refactor, replatform the hard strategies that are there. Which one should I choose? What is the guidance on how to choose? And once I have chosen it, how would I go about doing it step by step? And finding the right experts who can get this done, who can provide you the necessary inputs that you need to make a meaningful progress in this. The thing is, the way we have been approaching AWS, AWS has been approaching any migration modernization journey is a three-phase approach. One is the assess phase, where you need the necessary inputs to help you make a decision. Next is the mobilize phase, where you have where you can validate the decision that you have made, and you can validate it using a meaningful pilot with all the guardrails, and you have a plan to scale further. The last one is the actual migrate and modernize, where you are bringing in the transformation, either a rapid migration or iterative modernization before you can optimize and operationalize. So with that said, AWS Migration Journey is a new service that has been introduced earlier in the year. It is within the AWS Migration Hub umbrella that will give you a prescriptive template to carry out based on the migration modernization use case that you have. I have a data center exit. I have a mainframe modernization. And I have a database modernization. Data move to managed data as a use case that I want to progress. So any use case that you want to go with, Migration Hub Journey as a prescriptive template that is out there that can map out, hey, these are some of the steps that you need to make or you need to take, either the accelerator, a relevant AWS service, or an expert that you need to bring into table, especially when you need to make a decision, validate the decision, or carry it out at scale. There are several prescriptive templates that are out there for many of the use cases. I would love to try it out. You can build your own templates that are compliant with your corporate policies as well. And we would love to continue building more templates. If there are templates that are not out there that you would love to have it created, we would love to do so as well. Get started on using the Migration Hub journey so you could go through a similar journey like Marriott and be able to replicate in your organizations. You don't need a credit card, you don't need an AWS account to know what the journey is. All you need is an email. Go explore using the step one there. You would be able to explore all the ready-made templates that are out there. Okay, create your own custom journey as what accelerators, services that are there to help you with your journey. Play around. So there is also a workshop, step-by-step guide on how to play around with the Migration Hub journeys and get started. So there's a simple 3 steps. Would love to provide as a next step or a takeaway, in addition to all the great insights that you had from Adnan today. So we are able to help you in your journey as you move along. With this said, thank you for everyone, and thank you for your valuable time. Would love to have you fill out a survey in the end. If you were to take a minute before leaving our room to fill out the survey, it would definitely help us provide the necessary input, bring in more wonderful customers like Adnan, Marriott, to provide their journey, their insights to you. So we can continue growing as a community, making everyone better in a meaningful way. So love to hear your inputs, and thank you for being with us today. Thank you.